Welcome everyone to our online Dhamma group with Venerable Dhamma, who is joining us from Sri Lanka in the meditation center. So if anyone is interested in doing a course, then it's ready and you just have to sign up for it. And we will today continue our study of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta commentary by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw for 1 hour. And we have a reading group for that. If you want to join that, the requisite is to have done at least the at-home course. It's an online course that we also offer. After that, there will be time for discussion, and that is followed by a live Q&A. So you are welcome to already write your questions, maybe even about the text when we are reading, and we will ask them later. Before we start reading, we will together take the 5 precepts as usual. It's something we always do before the study group because it helps us bring our mind to the right mood, to the correct state of mind, and it's also a good reminder to keep the 5 precepts, to reaffirm this practice, and which is very helpful, very fundamental to the practice of mindfulness. And we take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It's also a very old tradition, both of them, to strengthen this connection to the Buddha's teachings. So is there anyone in the Discord who would like to do the recitation?
I would like to.
Thank you, Edith. You may start if you're ready.
Aham Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami Tatiyampi Aham Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami Tatiyampi Aham Bante Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Isarnagamanang nititang.
Ama bante.
Parnatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Atinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamesu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Kamisu miccācara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Surameraya majjapamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Sura miraya majja pamadatthana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami.
Imani pancha sikkhapadani Tilena sugating yanti, tilena bhoga sampada, tilena nibuting yanti, tasma silang suvidhatmi.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, let me just change my screen. So we will now continue with reading and studying the text. And we are currently on page 163 of the book, which is 173 of the PDF. And the paragraph is marked yellow. It's the last one. And before we start reading, we please remember to read slowly, take your time, and leave a pause between each paragraph, because we are not trying to read it quickly. We want to learn as much as possible from this great work. And also Venerable Tadamo has comments, so we can give him time to explain some parts of the text. Or if you have questions. And we read 2 paragraphs usually. And last person to read was me. So the next person in the list, which Martin shared in the chat group.
Can I interrupt a moment? Can anyone else
Yes.
see Delawar's reading text stream?
I cannot.
Okay. Let me try something.
You see it in his profile. If you click on his profile, it shows it correctly. So something's going wrong.
I noticed
Did
that
something
too, Bhante.
change?
You might have to exit and come back, exit the chat and come back.
Okay. Is it better?
That works now, friend.
Okay. Thank you. So edit would be the next person, and the rest of the list is in the Discord chat. So edit, if you're ready, please go ahead.
I am ready. The ability to distinguish the knower, nama, from the known, rupa, constitutes right view, although it may have been learned from books that the knowing mind is separate from the material body. Prior to taking up the meditation practice, at the initial stage of the practice, the meditator cannot distinguish the knowing mind and the material body through actual experience. It is only at the stage when analytical knowledge is developed that the distinction between these two occurs spontaneously. When noting the phenomenon of thinking or painful feeling as it occurs, the meditator discerns separately the thinking mind and the material object or painful feeling at the location of pain in the body. This discernment of mind as distinct from matter is knowing reality as it truly is, that is right view. The meditator becomes convinced that then that there is only the material body and the knowing mind. Apart from them, there is no such thing as a living being or entity. This is also knowing reality as it truly is with right view.
So it is. Okay, let's contextualize. Right, we're on the fourth noble truth. This is again the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first discourse of the Buddha. This is the commentary by the Mahasi Sayadaw, and he's gone through all three of the other noble truths, and he's on the fourth noble truth. Turning of the wheel of Dhamma is the presenting of the Four Noble Truths. When the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths, that set in motion the Dhamma wheel, which, as he will say, cannot be stopped. So that's the line after which the Dhamma is inevitably given to the world and spread throughout the world once the Four Noble Truths are taught. He's on the fourth noble truth at the moment, and Mahasi Sayadaw is discussing right view. The first of the fourth noble truth is, of course, the Eightfold Noble Path, the path which leads to the cessation of suffering. The first of the 8 parts of the noble path is right view, and so that's what he's talking about. Now, it doesn't look like he's going to go through them all individually, but he's going to discuss them. Right view, I guess, can be seen as the most important, the one that needs perhaps the most explaining. So this is the first of the stages of knowledge. We talked about it last week as well. And for anyone who's done any significant amount of practice in mindfulness, it's not really worth doubting whether you've experienced this or not. It's not that deep. I mean, it's an incredible attainment, but it's not that difficult to attain for someone who applies themselves to mindfulness, even for a few days. Let's say if you're not practicing intensively for a week or a couple of weeks, let's say a couple of weeks, it's really just the eradicating of the wrong view, something that dispels the wrong view from your mind. So a lot of people come into the practice with views. I mean, it's overwhelmingly common for people to come into the practice with views of self, belief that there is a self, that we have a soul, and that it is me that walks, it is me that talks, and so on. And this kind of goes out the window as you pay attention. It doesn't mean you have to completely give up wrong view. What might be misleading about this is it sounds like he's saying that someone who reaches this is already enlightened, right? There's already at least a sotapanna, because a sotapanna is the one who has no wrong view. But all this does really is dispels the inclination to say that there is a self and so on. It doesn't mean that you don't still believe in self. Not entirely, because you haven't become a sotapanna yet. But it really is just the first glimpse into the body and mind, which allows you to say, yes, there is only body and mind. It doesn't really give you that view, because that view is really only attained at sotapanna, but it allows you to see that. So it's the first glimpse. A lot of this, the very beginning stages of knowledge are just like a first glimpse that is challenging your views, challenging wrong view. And it's important because if you apply yourself with that wrong view, then you practice all wrong. Practically speaking, it becomes about forcing your mind to be mindful, forcing the foot to move correctly, forcing the stomach to rise and fall. I'm the one who's doing the rising and falling of the stomach. It sets you on the wrong path if you cling to those views, if you apply them in the practice. So it's not that you've completely eradicated those. You don't have to be worried if you're, I'm not sure if there is a self or not. Am I really doing this correctly? Am I getting anywhere, or am I failing? It's not a problem. It's just this is a challenge to that. It's giving you a clearer glimpse into reality. And by following that, by applying your mind to that glimpse and paying attention to it and looking at the world, starting to look at the world in that way, is the way you'll progress on the path and eventually reach the state where you do see, things arising and ceasing, and have a sense that all things that arise cease, and that they are not self. It isn't really the belief that there is no self, not really. It just dispels the idea or any conception of a self. But again, it mostly comes about in the practice, one, by seeing moments of arising and ceasing. So you separate moments of body into individual moments, and moments of mind into individual moments, and being able to separate the body from the mind. That's two things. Is the first stage of knowledge. It's pretty simple, not something you should overthink, and certainly not something you should intellectualize or analyze. It's just about watching, and seeing. If you can see the stomach rising, if you can see the stomach falling, if you can see the foot moving, the right foot moving, the left foot moving, if you can see pain arising and ceasing, you're already well on your way. That's really all this is about. Seeing how the mind goes to the object, seeing how mind is sometimes aware, sometimes not aware, and so on. You're already on the way.
As the concentration becomes further strengthened during the course of noting rising, falling, sipping, touching, seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling stiff, hot, or painful, one discerns clearly the origination of the object as well as its dissolution. the beginning and end of each phenomenon.
I think we're reading a different version.
Oh, sorry. I will come back here then. I was reading my own PDF, but I guess yes, because this looks like a bigger paragraph. Okay, sorry. As the power of concentration becomes further developed while noting rising, falling, sitting, touching, etc., one comes to realize that one touches because there is the material body to touch, sees because the eye and a sight, hears because of ear and sound, bends because of the desire to bend. One realizes also that one does not know the reality because one fails to take note of the phenomenon as it occurs. One develops liking because one does not know the true nature. One develops attachment because one likes it. One then knows that when one has developed attachment, one becomes engaged in activities such as doing or talking. These activities of doing and talking produce effects. Good when the action was wholesome, bad when the action was unwholesome. In this way, one gains the knowledge of cause and effect as far as one's perfections will allow. This again is knowing reality as it is, with the right view.
So this is basically saying that once you are able to see clearly body and mind and distinguish moments of, see clearly enough to be able to distinguish moments of body and from moments of mind and from each other, that you start to see how they work according to cause and effect. They don't just happen randomly, right? There's an orderliness to things. And some things are inevitable after other certain things. And you start to see these relationships, which is a very powerful and perhaps it's understated here and my explanation as well, because it's a very important stage. I think I've mentioned this before, but this is the stage that is called being a Jula Sotapanna in the Visuddhimagga. So the Visuddhimagga claims that at this stage one is destined to be freed from a bad rebirth in the next life as a result of reaching this knowledge, which really makes sense. I mean, I don't know what the source is. Like there's no, we don't have the Buddha's verification that this is true, but we tend to take the commentary at its word. And it does make sense because this is the point where one understands cause and effect, understands karma, and appreciates the significance and the weight of good karma and bad karma for oneself, not intellectually, not on faith, but actually sees how it's working, the mechanics of it in real time. And so attaining that, the second stage of knowledge, really at the very beginning of the practice, one is safe. Imina pananyanena samanagato lada satso lada patito jula sotapano nama hoti. One who has attained a refuge. Lada satso lada patito. One has attained a refuge, one has attained security as a Jula Sotapanna, meaning Stula means small, so it's like they're sotapanna, but only for this life. It means they've entered the stream temporarily. Understanding karma is enough to set you on the right path for this life, according to the Visuddhimagga.
As concentration becomes further strengthened during the course of noting rising, falling, sitting, touching, seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling stiff, hot, or painful, one discerns clearly the origination of the object as well as its dissolution, the beginning and end of each phenomenon. One becomes convinced through personal experience that every phenomenon is impermanent, that it comes into being only to vanish instantly. One realizes too that incessant arising and ceasing are dreadful suffering, and what is not subject to one's control is not self. This knowledge is also right view that knows reality.
This describes the third stage of knowledge, and really, to some extent, the whole of the rest of the path. Because the thing is, understanding karma is sort of just it's something you pass on the way to the truth. Understanding karma is great and it's mundane right view, but it's not really the path. Knowing what's right and what's wrong is great, but it's really only significant in terms of how it involves seeing clearly. So the goal is to see things as they are, to understand and to not get things wrong. And so, of course, doing bad deeds and thinking they are good deeds is a huge, gross mistake and misunderstanding of the nature of reality. And that's all that's really significant about karma. I mean, it's a big deal, right? If you understand karma, you do the right thing and you stop doing the wrong thing. You stop killing and stealing and cheating and lying and taking drugs and alcohol because you see for yourself that they are the wrong thing. But it's only significant in terms of how it relates to seeing clearly. It's a sign, if anything, that you're starting to see more clearly. What's really important is that as you see more and more clearly, that you see that the point is that any kind of clinging is a cause for suffering, or more clearly, even nothing is worth clinging to, right? We've already been through this. Why is that the most important thing to know? Because that's the most important truth. That's the ultimate truth that you realize. And why is nothing worth clinging to? Well, here's what he starts to explain, because the path is always described, Vipassana path is always described as seeing the three characteristics. And why that's significant, seeing the three characteristics, is because that is what causes you to see that nothing is worth clinging to. And when you see that nothing is worth clinging to, obviously you stop clinging. When you stop clinging, you stop suffering, and you're free. When you're free, you can say, I'm free, and that's it. So the third stage of knowledge, and really from there on, is all about deeper and deeper, clearer and clearer understanding that nothing is worth clinging to, by seeing impermanence, by seeing suffering, by seeing non-self. In all things, seeing something arise and starting to say, oh, I thought this was stable and it's not stable. I thought this was satisfying and it's not satisfying. I thought this was me and mine and under my control, and it's none of those things. That's what you see from the practice. It's quite limited, it's quite simple in the sense of not being a lot of things or a lot to learn or a lot to understand. It's not simple in the sense of it being easy. It's certainly not easy, but simple in terms of not being complicated. In fact, it's in many ways the opposite, the moving away or the untying of all the knots of complexity in life.
As the power of concentration gets still more developed, although the meditator is noting the acts of rising, falling, sitting, bending, stretching, lifting, moving forward, dropping, he or she is no longer aware of the objects in their various shapes and forms, such as the body, stomach, the limbs, etc. He or she notices only the rapid dissolution of successive phenomena. He or she perceives the swift passing away of the object of awareness, as well as the noting mind, and comes to the vivid realization of the real nature of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. The object of awareness passes away the instant it makes its appearance, and there is no self to fasten one's attachment onto. The knowing mind also dissolves so fast that there is no self, nothing to hold on to. Thus, with every noting, knowledge develops into the true nature of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. All of these constitute right view.
Yeah, again, this is a description of part of the path where the especially referring to where the meditator begins to see things as reality as opposed to concepts. What that means is instead of seeing the foot moving, there's only an observation of the sensation of the movement, basically the four elements. Doesn't mean you say, "Oh, this is fire, this is air," and so on. It means that's what you experience, and what'll often come is you'll get a sense of, "Oh, my foot, that's not even a foot. There's no foot there at all." This is intellectual, but it's a observation that occurs spontaneously as a result of the change in one's perception. But again, it's important to not be too obsessed with this knowledge that we're gaining. If this is news to you and you haven't done any meditation practice, really don't take this as a manual or a guide for how your practice should go. You're much better off to go in with a clear mind and just see what's actually there. Don't try and compare it to this or worry about whether or when you're going to experience all of this. This can be useful more for people who've already done a significant amount of practice to have a clearer appreciation of what they've gone through, or a clearer understanding of what they've gone through.
From the time that analytical knowledge develops to the stage of right view of insight, vipassana samadhi, the mind has been inclining towards perceiving reality as it is. This constitutes right thought. Right concentration is involved too to keep the mind fixed on the right object, and right mindfulness remains aware of it. All this while the meditator is engaged in one of the four foundations of mindfulness, contemplating the body postures, feelings, mind, and mental objects. he or she contemplates with right effort. Thus, whenever a meditator is engaged in meditation, 5 path factors are involved, 3 from the concentration group and 2 from the wisdom group. These 5 path factors cooperate in each act of heedful noting. The commentary calls them the 5 working factors, Panchasu Karakangesu. In addition, there are also involved the 3 factors of the morality group. Right speech, right action, and right livelihood by preserving the precepts and fulfilling the abstentions. This is how such involvement occurs. The meditator starts observing the precepts even before beginning meditation and keeps it purified. During the course of meditation, morality remains unpolluted and its purity is maintained. If anything, it may be said that morality gets more and more refined. Thus, with 3 path factors of morality added to the 5 working factors, a meditator is developing all 8 path factors at each instance of noting and knowing the phenomenon. The Mahasayadaw Sutta gives the following description of how the 8 path factors are developed. Bhikkhus, when the I is seen as it truly is, when sights, eye consciousness, eye contact, and feeling that arises due to eye contact are seen as they truly are, then no liking is developed for the eye, sights, eye consciousness, etc. Seeing the eye, sights, etc. as they truly are, and no liking and attachment being developed for them, for the person who sees only revulsion in them, the aggregates of attachment, which may have arisen through failure to note, get no opportunity to appear. Craving for these objects also ceases and gets annihilated.
The view of such a person is right view. Thoughts are right thoughts. Efforts are right efforts. Mindfulness is right mindfulness. Concentration is right concentration. Even before starting meditation, the meditator is well established in right speech, right action, and right livelihood. In this way, the meditator becomes established in the Noble Eightfold Path.
Yeah, so the 3 morality factors can be seen as sort of clearing the way. They don't actually do anything active. Doesn't mean you have to go out of your way to find someone who you might want to hurt and not hurt them, or steal and not steal. But you don't have to be put in a situation. You just have to be clear with all of them. And you have to be in a situation where you're not inclining to do those things. You have to really be in a state of mind that is not inclining to do those things. So it's a way of saying that there are prerequisites of mind. You have to be in the right frame of mind. A thief has very great difficulty sitting still until they can get the clarity of mind to see that stealing is wrong and to give it up. So they're not, that's why they're not called active. The other ones are what you're actively doing. That's why sila is considered to be that which leads to samadhi. Sila is the state of mind, you could say, where you're in a state of mind ready to begin practicing, and you're not inclining to kill or steal, or you're not inclining in any corrupt way.
This is a brief account in the Buddha's words of how the Noble Eightfold Path is developed when the meditator discerns what should be known at the moment of seeing, the true nature of the 5 phenomena involved, the eye, visual objects, etc. For a detailed description, please refer to the Mahasi Sayadaw Sutta.
The 5 there are the eye, the thing that is seen, the consciousness, which is the experience of that which is seen, and the contact, which is just the contact between those 3 things. So when the eye and the sight come together and consciousness is present, then there is seeing, and them coming together is called contact. The feeling that arises, actually, technically, feeling that is just always neutral, because the light touching the eye doesn't cause pain or pleasure. It's just a neutral feeling, but that's only technically. Practically speaking, you're going to like what you see, and it's going to be a happy feeling, or dislike what you see, and there'll be an unhappy feeling, a painful feeling, even a mental painful feeling, because you see something ugly or unpleasant or scary or this sort of thing. Or just obviously a neutral feeling because you just see something ordinary. Those are not the only 5 things, but in this sutta and in general, you could say they're the 5 important ones. And so at each of the 6 senses, or each of the 5 senses, this is what happens. This is how experience occurs. And so you see this. The point is that you're paying attention. For example, with contact, you're seeing sometimes the mind is not even at the eye. The eye is open, but you don't see anything because the mind is occupied somewhere else. But without contact, there is no seeing. For example, obviously, if the lights are off, there's no light, and there's nothing to be seen. If the eyes are closed as well, there's nothing to be seen unless you just see mentally, but you can't see the things around you with the eyes closed. And of course, if you have no eyes, you also don't see the things around you. What's important there is seeing the sort of impersonal nature of it, the mechanical nature of it, that it's not really me who is seeing, it's not me who is intending to see, and therefore the seeing happens. It's all just coming together orderly, in an orderly manner, but really just mechanically as moments of experience.
Susan, you're next.
The commentary states that the Noble Eightfold Path becomes established at the moment of achieving the Noble Path. This may be taken as a superior interpretation. I prefer to take the view that what is meant here is the path of insight rather than the Noble Path. which is achieved by accomplishing the path of insight. My interpretation will be found to be in accord with the fact that knowledge as to the true nature of the eye, sights, eye consciousness, eye contact, and feeling comes only through insight meditation. The Noble Path, on the other hand, does not take the eye, sights, etc. as its object. It accomplishes only the function of knowing.
So this paragraph is probably a source of some confusion. For some of you who remember, I've already explained this before, but let's just recap. Noble path here, it sounds like, why is he talking about two different things, Vipassana path and noble path? In noble path, this is very technical, and you really don't have to pay too much attention to this because it's very technical, but he's trying to arrange things properly in a very theoretical framework. And so there's not a conflict here. It's just the commentary is being very technical when it says, at the moment of the noble path, that's when the Eightfold Noble Path is developed, because that's literally what that means. But that, what we call the noble path, is one moment. And it's the first moment where the mind, let's say, experiences Nibbana, or there is the experience of Nibbana. That first moment. Because the experience can last longer than one moment, but the first moment is called the path, and that takes Nibbana as the object, so it has nothing to do with the eye. But it really doesn't, there's no conflict here, because that only comes about, and one becomes established in that as a result of seeing very, very clear, perfectly clearly, the eye consciousness, and the sights, and so on, which is the Vipassana path. So what he's talking about here is one that leads to the other. The Vipassana path is the actual practice that everyone's familiar with, that we do, and it leads to eventually perfect observation, perfect understanding, which in turn leads to cessation and the experience of Nibbana. But that experience of Nibbana is technically called the path, and it's only called that, and nothing else is called that, because it's only that moment that actually cuts the defilements. And all the moments before that don't accomplish that function, so they can't really be called the path, as in the thing that leads technically to the goal. None of those other things actually lead to the goal. It's just that one last moment. So it's very technical. And so the question is, which one is the Buddha talking about here? I mean, obviously he's talking about both. He's saying that when you pay attention to the eye and sights and the consciousness, that's what gets you established and eventually leads to perfect establishment in the path and the attainment of the noble path, which takes Nibbana as the object.
So Bhante, the noble path without eightfold in between. So there's the noble eightfold path and there's the noble path. And is the noble path then referring to the 4 stages, or am I lost?
No, the noble path is referring, well, the 4 stages, yes, but also the eightfold noble path. The noble path is the noble eightfold path, which is why there's confusion, because what does that have to do with any of those 8 things? At that moment, there's cessation. The point is, at that moment, one is perfect in all of those 8 things. Before that moment, even though you can say, oh yes, I'm cultivating all of these 8 path factors, they're not perfect in them. So it's just saying you're perfect. That moment is perfect. And that's why it's noble. Because up until that point, no matter how hard you're working at them, you're not yet perfect. Right? Simple. Once the eightfold path is perfect, it's called the Eightfold Noble Path. And that's the noble path. It's also just called Magganyana. So it's, the word noble is even dropped. Magganyana means knowledge of the path. And knowledge here just means the stage on the path of realization. That moment on the path of realization, after you've realized, or after your realization, your perception, your perspective has become perfectly in line with the truth, then there is the path. called Magga.
Okay, I will have to digest this a bit, but thank you, Bhante.
But initially, I think I kind of thought that something's missing from here, but I guess now that I read it over a couple of times, so the phrase that with the fact that knowledge as to the true nature of the eye, sight, eye consciousness, eye contact, and feeling comes only through insight meditation. So I was like, yeah, but the anicca, dukkha, and anatta nature of these, right? And I think the true nature is containing that part, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The only true nature you need to know is the three characteristics. That's it.
Okay, yes.
Which is basically you see it arising and ceasing, that's impermanence. You see it arising and ceasing incessantly, which is basically dukkha. And you see it happening without your control, which is non-self. And in fact, you only need to see one or the other three. Well, you see all three, but the last moment will be only really seeing one or the others, one of the three in great clarity.
Yeah.
I mean, practically speaking, it's one of the three becomes the door, the gateway to liberation.
Yeah, so just in regards to, let's say, just the eye as a matter, right? Or a door, or just the sense door, like the process. If you understand one of these true natures of the I as a matter, then it, enlightenment can happen. But not just like on seeing I, sight, I consciousness, etc. Right?
Well, when you see a tiger, you see its stripes. I mean, when you see I as it's actually occurring, you're also seeing impermanence, you're seeing suffering, and you're seeing non-self.
Yes.
But it will practically it kind of hits you, and it hits you again and again. It's impressed upon you as you observe it as being impermanent, suffering, and non-self. But it's just seeing it arise and cease again and again, basically.
Yes. So I think it's worth mentioning that the true nature here is that this is what it means.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, if you want to say it another way, it's seeing all of the stages of knowledge up to even, well, let's say 11 anyway. So it's more detailed. You could say it in more detail than just the three characteristics, but it's really better not, because those are the kinds of things that you have to experience for yourself rather than talk about them or explain them to people.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask, but also just I think it's worth mentioning that sometimes when we would just use this concept true nature, anyone can think of many things, but in fact, this is what it means.
Similarly, by noting the phenomena of hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, the five phenomena that become prominent at the respective moments of occurrence could be known, and the Noble Eightfold Path developed accordingly.
What has been
Thinking
explained
occurs a little bit differently, but basically it's the same.
What has been explained so far relates to involvement of the path factors of morality by way of maintaining them unpolluted while practicing insight meditation. Abstention from immorality during meditation. There is no opportunity to commit wrong speech, such as lying, with regard to the objects being observed as they really are at the moment of noting them. Just consider for a moment, where is the necessity to lie about an object that one neither likes nor dislikes, having seen its true nature of impermanence and cessation after dissolution? Similarly, no occasion arises to slander, to abuse, or to talk frivolously, in brief, to commit wrong speech in connection with that object. Likewise, there is no question of committing wrong acts such as killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, or engaging in wrong livelihood. Thus, every time reality is seen while noting right speech, which is abstinence from wrong speech, right action, which is abstinence from wrong action, and right livelihood, which is abstinence from wrong livelihood, are accomplished with reference to the object under review. It is by abstinence that the path factors of morality are involved in the development of the path of right view.
Yeah, in fact, you could even go further and say it's not even that there's no opportunity. It's that your activity is absolutely contrary to the idea of lying. Right? When you say rising, when the stomach rises, that's the truth. And so, of course, it brings you closer to the truth. It also keeps you on the straight and narrow. For lack of a better term, that's not really probably the best, but it keeps you straight. It keeps your mind not crooked. So the mind is just not in a state where it could do anything, say anything, or do anything crooked, because the mind is perfectly clear and in line with reality. Reality, again, doesn't admit to immorality. It's one thing that I think, I can't think of it. I haven't heard of any other moralist. I mean, there very well may be, who picks up on this. Like all these people who talk about ethics, all these philosophers. There may very well be, but generally speaking, it's missed, I think. So people will talk about reasons why you should be ethical, and giving rationalization for being ethical or not. There are even existentialist philosophies that say killing is just an action. I mean, what is good or bad about it? But the truth is that it's baked into reality that you can't be immoral when you're in tune with reality. It's very much a feature of the system. It's very much a part of reality. Which is why it's so important to start there, because you'll never get close to reality if you're actively engaging in unethical behaviors.
So we will stop the reading then for today because we have hit the first hour. And everyone is welcome to write their questions either in Discord, in the chat, or on YouTube. And we will slowly start with a live Q&A. And we encourage everyone to relate the questions to something they want to ask with sincerity, or it's related to their practice. And it would be good if it's related to the practice the Venerable Dhamma teaches, because then you will get the best answers, I suppose. And anyone who's interested in learning how to practice is welcome to use this opportunity to learn about it. Or is someone here in Discord who would like to comment or say something? Continue the discussion from the text.
Ante, I would like to start us off with the first question that we have, and it's regarding the text. The question is, how does one know if right knowing of the right view has been established? Is that what this excerpt is talking about, amongst other things?
How does one know? Well, I mean, that's a little bit overcomplicating it. You shouldn't look for some kind of reassurance of knowing. It's simpler than that. You know when you see for yourself. You see what you see for yourself is what you know. Let's put it that way. And you can't go beyond that, right? Because you're asking a question out of doubt. Have I experienced X? X being in this case right view. What you've experienced is what you've experienced. What you've seen is what you've seen. So the real question is, what is the benefit of what I've seen? What is the value of what I've seen? And I can't answer that. For the individual, is what I've seen valuable? Is what I've seen, could it be considered wrong, or could it be considered right view? Basically, if what you've seen is the three characteristics, in other words, if you've seen how the things that you thought were stable and constant and predictable are not that, if you've seen that the things that you thought were satisfying and a source of happiness are not that, you've seen that the things that you thought were me, mine, under my control, self entities that existed as actual things, that they're not that. When you see that they're not that, if you've seen that they're not that, then you could say that is right view. But technically, right view and where you'll get this confidence that you have right view is at the noble path. So you'll only get that confidence after experiencing Nibbana, after having taken Nibbana as an object, had an experience of cessation. Then there is confidence. You have no doubt or no uncertainty or no suspicion that it might be otherwise. So if you still have doubt and you think, I don't know how nature of reality, it's just because you're not there yet. You haven't had that experience of cessation. Until that time, you just pay more attention and keep it simple, focusing on what you have experienced. Because there's really no separation there. It's not like you could see things as they actually are and not see the three characteristics. They're not something that pops up at you. They're kind of the absence. What'll happen is you'll see, oh, I thought it was like this and it's not. Or, oh, look at how I'm acting as though it was like this, and that's just causing me suffering because it's not like that. In the beginning, it's much more like, why is my meditation so horrible? I can't make things stable. I can't make things satisfying. I can't make things controllable. In the beginning, it's still a rejection of the three characteristics. Why am I seeing these things? Why is it like this? How could I possibly see the truth if I'm always blocked by this reality of things being not stable, not satisfying, and not controllable? How am I ever going to succeed in meditation? So in the beginning, it really is about realizing that, that the things that you are complaining about are actually the whole point of the practice. And the reason you're suffering is not because things are like that. They're because you believe they shouldn't be, and you're still trying to seek out something that is not that way. And that's the lesson. The lesson is that you're suffering. Even in meditation, you're suffering terribly because you're still seeking out stability, satisfaction, and control. And since reality isn't like that, you're suffering. So if you're patient and persist in that, what will change is not the things. They will not suddenly become stable, satisfying, and controllable, where you say, oh, my meditation is so good, it's so stable, it's so satisfying, it's so controllable. Your perception will change, and you'll say, yeah, things are impermanent, unsatisfying, and controllable. That's just the way they are. Then you can see. Then you can be reassured you've started to get right view.
Bante, there seems to be no more questions for regarding the reading, so we'll move on to questions related to practice. The next question, Bante. Could you contextualize sleepiness? I see it as a problem as it hinders meditation. It feels like a fight. How does noting help? Isn't lazy a judgment more than an observation?
Well, I would start by saying when you see something as a problem, that's a problem. Problem that you see it as a problem. You should instead better see it as an experience. Because reality doesn't admit of problem in two ways. I mean, first of all, it doesn't admit of labeling them in such a way, but it also, nothing can be a problem if you're in touch with reality. Once you're in touch with reality, those things are not problems for you. You should not be trying to control the sleepiness. In other words, asking how it helps. It helps initially by changing your perspective on things. Stop trying to fix things. Stop trying to control things. Seeing that even sleepiness, like everything else, is not under your control. It's not predictable. Like you can say, oh, now it's going to go away. Not satisfying. In other words, you can make it stay away and never have it arise when you don't want it. But there are strategies. I mean, you may have heard of some of the strategies, like when you're sitting, you can stand up and do standing meditation or even do walking meditation. It can be better for facing the sleepiness, but ultimately you have to just face it. And it will change. Sometimes you'll feel sleepy, sometimes you won't, but I mean, like everything else, it's just an experience. You see it as a problem, practically it can get in the way of practice because, well, you fall asleep, but there's really not much in the long term that you can or should do about that. I mean, what we're trying to do is learn how to let go. So this is a thing that you seeing it as a problem makes it a problem, or makes a problem because you're clinging to it, you're holding on to it. Sleepiness is just something that comes and goes. When you work really hard, then you're sleepy. When you have lots of hindrances, then you get very sleepy. But laziness, lazy isn't a very good noting, not very objective. It is, as you say, a judgment. So we would never note lazy. We would note tired or sleepy or drowsy or something like that.
Bante, here is the next question. If I feel stiffness in my leg, for example, would you recommend focusing on the entire leg or a smaller area where the sensation is strongest? The same question for feelings and emotions.
Or things like stiffness, you don't have to put too much, place too much importance on it. Just note stiff when you experience it. You don't have to place your mind anywhere. Your mind is already like gone to the object. So when you experience stiffness, just say stiff. You don't have to really send the mind anywhere. The mind already goes there. The point is not to just blindly say stiff, stiff, stiff. But when you experience it, the mind is with the object already. Just say stiff. And if the mind is still there, keep saying stiff, stiff. But I wouldn't spend too much time on it or wait for it to go away or anything like that. Stiffness isn't a significant object. Better to just note it a few times and then go back to the stomach rising and falling. For feelings, I don't know which feelings you're talking about, but for pain, for pleasure, for calm, that's different because those are the kinds of things that are significant. They're likely to give rise to liking or disliking. So it's good to note them until they disappear. Try and note liking, or note happy, happy, calm, calm, pain, pain until it goes away. And emotions, absolutely. Emotions are generally hindrances, so you have to note them. And I mean, when we say hindrance emotions, we're usually talking about liking or disliking of some sort, which are hindrances. And it could be worry or fear or doubt as well, are also other hindrances. But yeah, absolutely have to note them until they disappear. But again, not trying to make them disappear, just be vigilant to stay with them and face them until they do go away. If after a long time they still don't go away, then go back to the stomach. But with things like stiffness, yeah, just note a few times and then go back.
Here's the next question, Bante. Have you seen more difficulties for people with CPTSD in regards to finishing the course or making progress in the path?
Regards to what? I don't know what that C is for. I've heard of PTSD before. No, I think, I mean, I don't know what CPSD is, but CPTSD, but I know what PTSD is. People with PTSD, I think PTSD could be a really good catalyst for helping someone inclined to learn about how the mind works. I don't think it's a severe handicap. I mean, it depends, I suppose. If a person, it's not really the PTSD, it's more the situations surrounding it. So if a person has done terrible things, right? If one was a soldier with PTSD and they killed a lot of people, it's not so much the PTSD as it is the killing. That's the problem. I mean, if one has survived horrible experiences, then it kind of is the PTSD, but it's just because it's so severe. So yes, the severity is going to make a difference, but can be a real good catalyst to help you learn about how the mind works. I mean, I think PTSD is something in my mind that goes away pretty quickly. That is mitigated, alleviated pretty quickly through the practice. That's my my thought on it. Obviously depends on the individual, depends on many other factors. Mostly depends on, like in every case, depends on the perfections of the person, the qualities that they bring into this life, the good and bad qualities. One has lots of good qualities that they brought to the practice already. PTSD won't stand in their way, because things like PTSD often just come from lack of knowledge, lack of any instruction on the proper way to deal with such things. So they just crop up like bad habits. If a person has the qualities required to develop good habits, then they're very quickly able to change. If they don't have those qualities, then it doesn't matter how much you teach them, it will be very difficult for them. It doesn't have so much to do with the PTSD, it has to do more with other things, deeper things, like the fiber of their being, I guess you could say. But basically the qualities and the qualities that they bring into this life or bring into the practice. from this life and from past lives. Basically, are they a good person?
Bante, here's the next question. Once, I encouraged a friend to meditate, but after a few tries, he stopped, saying that he prefers to be distracted from his mind, rather than having to face it at the current moment in his life. Is there anything useful that can be said in such a situation to such a person?
Yeah, not a lot. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I mean, superficially, you're much better served giving the practice to people who want to practice. But on a deeper level, you can approach them asking why or what is it specifically that they want to be distracted from, because the mind in general is not something that they can be distracted from. It's not the mind, it's specific things. And so if you help them break it down, you can help show them that it's much better to face those things, and that it is much more possible to face those things than to have to face the mind, right? And the big problem with that statement is they're grouping it all together. They're turned it into a boogeyman. Boogeyman meaning something that doesn't exist but is scary. So they've created this imaginary monster, the mind. You don't have to face the mind, because the mind is not a thing that exists. You only have to face present moments. And the real point is that you'll always face them regardless of whether you want, or you'll always be confronted by them. You can't avoid them. Your only choice is how you respond to them. And so the choice we make is to have a clear mind and to not respond to them with greed, with anger, with delusion, with a polluted mind. But I guess the most encouraging thing is that they're only momentary, that you don't have to ever deal with the mind. You only have to deal with one mind state, one moment of mind, one experience. And every experience is just momentary. And that's all you'll ever have to deal with. And if you perceive it that way, it's actually not that scary. It's not that hard. It's certainly valuable. So help your friend, him or her, him, help him break it up, deconstruct what he's really averse to facing, and help him see that it's actually pretty manageable and worth managing, because every time you avoid it, you cultivate that bad habit of aversion, and you make it into a bigger problem. You don't actually fix anything. It doesn't lead to a solution. But yeah, mostly you're just better served. You're mostly better served just focusing on your own practice, and the people who are interested will come to you.
Bante, I have a follow-up question. let's say there are no people around you who are interested, but you yourself wish to put your energy towards sharing the teachings and the practice, what would you suggest to that person?
I think the correct answer is move to a place where there are people who are interested. That I mean, the Buddha said the spiritual life is all about association with good people, and so that really is the base. Trying to be out on your own and help people, I mean, is perfectly viable, perfectly reasonable, defensible, but it's not the advice. I guess the advice is more once you've, well, okay, so if you haven't established yourself in the Buddha's teaching, then absolutely you should associate very closely with good people, like go to a meditation center and stay there until you are established. If once you are established and then you move out, it's still, the question is why? Why would you go to a place where no one is interested? What good is it? It's not good for Buddhism either. Buddhism needs people, needs strength, and there's strength in numbers. We need centers where there are people working together to share the Buddha's teaching. We also do need travel, I think. I was thinking actually today of maybe doing a trip, maybe through Europe. Not through America, I don't think, but to travel. Because I have that, I have the skill, I've done this enough to be able to share it with others, and because I know there are people who are interested. But that's the thing, is I would travel, I would present it as a potential trip and solicit interest, So if, like we did when I did go travel through America, through the East Coast of America, we asked people, is there anyone on the East Coast who is interested in hosting something, having a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day meditation course, at 1 day, just a day course of meditation, inviting all their friends and neighbors and people in their community, and organizing something and letting me stay, giving me a place to stay for a night, me and someone who could go with me. But it would be those people, it would still be soliciting interest. So if people were interested, we could do it and go to those places where people responded. So there is room for sharing the teachings, obviously, and spreading the teachings, even, what do you say, proselytizing, not really, but opening the door and giving people the opportunity to, those who are interested. Because the bigger problem is not, the big problem is not that people are not interested. If people are not interested, then that should be the end of it. No problem. You're not interested, then I'll go my own way. Real problem, and it is a real problem, I think, as far as you can call something a problem. It's an issue, let's say, or it's an issue of interest, is that those people who are interested or would be interested, are interested or would be interested, are not able to hear the teaching. That's a real travesty, you could say. And that's why the Buddha taught. That's why he sent his disciples out into the world to teach. Because there are people out there who are ready to hear the Dhamma, even today. Not perhaps as many or as readily as in the Buddha's time, but readily enough. And there are people out there who would benefit quite easily from the Buddha's teaching, who will not. And they will not because they won't hear of it. There are such people. And you hear that, I guess that sort of thing is said of all religions. The Christians are in a hurry to head to all corners of the world because there could be people who haven't heard the Christian gospel. But I mean, it's really kind of true with Buddhism. Buddhism isn't some belief in a imaginary being. Buddhism is a practice that really does lead to peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. So it's a real travesty that people who could benefit and would immediately see the benefit, or quickly anyway, see the benefit, are just not going to. I was kind of lucky. I mean, not overly so, but I was kind of lucky in that I met a couple of people like that when I went back. I mean, it really gave me encouragement that I met a couple of people who just came up to me. They'd heard I'd been to practice and were very quick to come and learn from me. One of them is now a meditation teacher in our tradition. Two of them, I guess. Yeah, and they're married, actually. But for them it was easy, I mean, I didn't have much knowledge at the time, but I just gave them what I knew, and they were hooked because they had the requisites.
Sadhu, Bhante. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm sure your mention of travel would ignite some interest in many people here. If it's okay, I would like to move on to the next question. Here's the next question, Bhante. When reading or doing other intellectual work, I am able to be mindful of thinking, knowing, seeing, etc. However, this means I am much slower to complete the work. It's like working two jobs, mindfulness and work. Should I continue this?
Yeah, not really. Your best bet is probably do your work and take breaks. Because work suffers when you don't take breaks, right? Work doesn't get better. With studying, for example, studying for exams or whatever, taking relatively frequent breaks actually improve the study. So you can read about this. There's studies done about how long you only best remember the first thing and the last thing that you study, something like that. And so shorter sessions are actually better, but work is similar. If you do work for a long time, it doesn't improve your ability, your capacity to work doesn't improve. At some point, you have to know to take a break. And then when you take a break, then dedicate your mind to mindfulness. The problem you're facing is that you are doing two different things. And mindfulness, it doesn't really progress in that way. It's not bad. I mean, any moment when you're mindful is actually good. So technically, it's not a problem. But the problem is that you're trying to do two things mentally. It's different than when you're doing physical jobs. When you're doing a physical job, okay, physically I'm doing this, mentally I'm doing it mindfully. It doesn't really detract from the physical work. But mental work, you're switching, you're back and forth. So mindfulness doesn't really progress, and your work really doesn't progress, because both really kind of require continuity, generally speaking. and that's what you're experiencing. So no, it's not really the best way. I don't think there's any teacher that would really recommend that. What I would say as an exception is the hindrances. Hindrances are hindrances for meditation, but they're hindrances for life as well, especially the mental part of your life, obviously. So mental hindrances, whenever they come up, are something you absolutely should stop and immediately apply mindfulness to them. But I wouldn't recommend trying to apply mindfulness in general to your job. Another thing is things like pain, which things that give rise to hindrances. So you're working mentally and you get a headache, or you get a crick in your neck, or you get a stomach ache, or something like that. When that comes up, really pretty good to stop and note, because the hindrances follow quite quickly after, if you're not mindful. So things like that. It's not a cut and dried thing where no, you should not, but I don't think it's a good strategy. I think you're better off taking mindfulness breaks. And you'll find probably better success that way, in both ways. Better success in mindfulness, better success in your work.
Bante, here is the next question that we have. I try to follow the 5 precepts, but I cannot just stop lying. Telling the truth can lead to negative outcomes or troubles. Is there any way around this? I also cannot just let mosquitoes live once I see them. I don't hate them, but it's a responsibility to kill them.
Well, lying obviously leads to negative consequences as well, mostly for yourself. Just think of how it affects your life. It affects your conscience. You're lying to people. You don't see that as having negative consequences. You're denying them the truth. You're denying them reality. Not lying doesn't, however, mean that you always have to tell the truth. It's a false dichotomy. There's a third option. You don't have to say anything. You can also say something that's not a lie, but not the bare, unfettered truth that you're thinking in your mind. Like a simple, silly one. Do I look fat in this dress? I mean, it's a pretty subjective question. So you don't have to, if you think, wow, they really do look fat in that dress. You don't have to say, yes, I think you look really fat in that dress. You can look at them and maybe look at them in a certain way and say to yourself, well, fat is not this. And or you can think, they look beautiful. And you don't think of the fact that they look fat in the dress, and you say, you look beautiful. Is a good example. You know, like instead of saying you look fat, you look beautiful. You didn't say no, for example. There's many ways to be a little bit more conscientious, a little bit more thoughtful. And you're thoughtful in 2 ways. You're thoughtful in terms of how you nuance what you say, but you're also thoughtful in terms of how damaging it is to deny someone the truth by misleading them in that way, by telling them something that is not false. But I mean, the big deal is actually not that. The bigger deal is how it corrupts your mind. A person who is mindful cannot lie. So if you want to really be able to keep the 5 precepts that you're trying to follow, mindfulness is going to guide you. We say it starts by keeping the 5 precepts, but it really starts by a determination to keep the 5 precepts followed by mindfulness, which in turn makes you actually able to keep the 5 precepts. I mean, the same goes with things like alcohol. People who strive to keep the 5 precepts often fail because they take drugs or they take alcohol. But a person who determines to keep the 5 precepts and then undertakes mindfulness will quite quickly see why things like alcohol are a breach, because they don't go with being mindful. But none of them do. Killing, stealing, cheating, lying, drugs and alcohol. None of them at all can exist in combination with mindfulness. So it's choosing one or the other. Lying is absolutely the worst choice. There's no question. You're corrupting your own mind. You're polluting their mind. You're just distorting reality. It's just a vicious, evil thing to do. Don't ever do it. But it doesn't. The problem is people think, well, then I have to tell the truth all the time. You don't actually. You don't have to say anything. But when you do speak, it has to be true. It should be beneficial, but the point is, the problem is it's difficult to always understand what is beneficial, but you should have an idea that it's beneficial. And it should be timely. Sometimes something is true and beneficial, but it's just not the right time to say that, Person is not able to hear it, not ready to hear it. So 3 things make speech worth saying. There's another factor in that it's pleasing to the ear, pleasant, and that isn't always an absolute deal breaker. Sometimes, so this is when it comes to something being timely. If something is not pleasing, then you know the time at which to say it. If something is pleasing, true, and beneficial, then you should just right away say it. This person's going to like hearing this, and it's true, and it's going to benefit them. Say it. But if it's not pleasing, then you have to know the right time to say it. So if someone is fat and like, do you think I'm getting fat? Do you think I'm overweight? Know when the right time is to say yes. When the right time is to maybe equivocate or not sure. Or say something like, you look okay. You look okay to me. Because that's pretty vague. It's not lying. And then when you think this person's ready to say, maybe you could go on a diet or stop eating these things that are unhealthy for you. Obviously, this is not speech that's really, but this is the kind of idea, an example. More important are things like, do you think I should stop taking drugs and alcohol? Do you think I'm wrong to get angry? For example, if someone's getting angry all the time and they ask you, am I right to get angry at this person? Absolutely, the answer is no, you should never get angry. But they may not be ready to hear that. They may get angry at you if you say that. So sometimes you have to be a little bit more thoughtful about how you approach it, but never lie. There's never a good reason to lie. You're just doing yourself a disservice. You're doing them a disservice. That's just not right. And you know that because mindfulness prevents it. You can't be mindful and lie. It just doesn't happen. So it's baked into reality. It really is. For killing, you can just let mosquitoes live once you see them. You can. You absolutely can. Nobody is pointing a gun to your head and saying you must kill them. You absolutely can. Even if someone is pointing a gun to your head, you still absolutely can let them live. And that's the Buddhist way. As a Buddhist, even if someone was holding a gun to your head, you die before you kill. You die before you kill, because mindfulness doesn't allow for it. It's just baked into reality. Killing is always wrong. I mean, the killing itself isn't wrong. You can step on an ant and it's not wrong if you didn't notice the ant was there. But the mind states they're not compatible with reality. They're not compatible with truth. They're not compatible with mindfulness, clarity, purity. So I don't understand why you have a responsibility to kill mosquitoes, because let's analyze it. You kill a mosquito, what have you actually done? Have you made the world run out of mosquitoes quicker? You haven't done anything. There's always more mosquitoes, just as there's always more living beings and there's always more samsara. Even if you were able to eradicate all the mosquitoes on earth, kill them all off, you haven't really done anything, because samsara will just reproduce more. Ultimately, you haven't come any closer to freedom from suffering, which is really the only important thing. You know, you talk about responsibility. What is the meaning of responsibility? Responsibilities are not real. Responsibilities are conventional. So they serve a purpose. But you don't have any responsibility to this person or that person, to this society or that society, to this culture. They're just convention. And they don't have any meaning. They're meaningless in the long term. They're ultimately meaningless. I'm obviously in the short term, in the practical sense. If you don't live up to your responsibilities, people get angry and people might throw you in jail or this sort of thing, you know. You can be killed for not fulfilling responsibilities. So practically, they're very important. But when you talk about having a responsibility to kill, well, you're just buying into the corruptness of the world, which is also baked into the world. Talk about being baked in. A lot of the things that are called responsibilities are polluted by evil. The responsibility to drink alcohol when your friends are drinking, to fit in. A responsibility to kill, yes, that's a common one. Steal, not so common. Responsibility to lie, that's a common one. These are not real. And it doesn't matter who says you're responsible for killing, you don't benefit from it. The world doesn't benefit from it. No good comes from it. All it does is pollute your mind. It cultivates vengeance. So the beings who you've killed end up coming back and meting out revenge on you. If not in this life, then in future lives. There's all that to worry about. There's no good that comes from it. And you see that. This isn't theory, this isn't belief. This is what you see through the practice of mindfulness, which is why trying to keep the 5 precepts alone is not very effective. But when you do establish yourself, I'm going to keep the 5 precepts, and then you undertake mindfulness, you find yourself keeping them as a matter of course. My father used to kill, used to drink alcohol, and now he does neither. I mean, these are the 2 really clearly obvious ones that people break. Right? The others are occasional. I mean, lying, it doesn't come up all the time, right? But killing, for many people, killing mosquitoes is just so common. And drugs and alcohol, for many people, alcohol is just a part of life. He does neither anymore. As far as I know, he doesn't kill. He's told me that he doesn't. And he certainly doesn't take alcohol anymore. He just doesn't. He just can't. He said it just doesn't work. I can't be mindful, so how could I drink alcohol? I can't be mindful if I'm even a little bit intoxicated. He saw that. I think you just have to reevaluate your priorities and truth and reality. And don't worry about too much about the precepts. Worry more about the mindfulness that you undertake after desiring to keep the 5 precepts, because the mindfulness will show you the way to keep them.
Bhante, here's the next question that we have. I tried a bit, as you recommend, to note hearing during a Dhamma talk. I feel as if drunk, like words are echoing in the head, chaotically. Is this all good? Should I just keep going and what sticks, sticks?
It's the 3 characteristics you're seeing right there. So that's evidence that it's effective. And that's great. If you're getting that far, that's all you really need. There are different reasons to listen to Dhamma talks. You can listen to a Dhamma talk for knowledge, information. And in that case, you probably don't want to emphasize too much the practice, but the best way, even listening to a Dhamma talk, is to be mindful. Don't worry so much about the information.
Here's the next question, Bhante. You mention hindrances make one sleepy, but my experience is that mental work is the cause of sleepiness, and work is needed for food and shelter. So is sleepiness not a hindrance in my case?
Sleepiness, some aspect of sleepiness is a hindrance. The mental torpor or stiffness of mind. But the thing is, your work, 2 people doing the same work, mental work especially, one with hindrances and one without hindrances, the one without hindrances is going to absolutely have a lot more energy at the end of it. But when you say doing mental work, the question is, what is your state of mind when you do that work? Are you stressed? Are you worried? Are you frustrated? Are you annoyed? Are you angry? Are you greedy? Any number of things, all those things will make it much more tiresome and leave you more tired at the end of it. As far as mental work being the cause of sleepiness, not really, not really. It's the hindrances, absolutely hindrances, the impurities of mind, because the mind is always doing something, right? It's not the mind that makes itself sleepy. But that being said, the body shuts down. And so there is that element of it. But a person who is truly mindful has no problem staying awake night and day without sleep. There are stories of monks who did this for months. I have stories of people doing it for days anyway, and they really have no problem. So the mental work, the problem with it is it's conducive to hindrances. That's really the problem, is you're not using the mind mindfully. And so it's not the actual work itself, it's the state of mind. Which is why if you're mindful, if your mind is clear and pure, you're able to do mental work a lot more efficiently. I found that after practicing meditation, going back to study, I was always quite intellectually smart and good memory and all these things that you need, but I couldn't succeed very well in school, in university anyway, because I was too distracted. I couldn't apply myself. And when I went back after meditating, everything was a breeze. I was no longer stressed. There was no worry about exams. I would come out of exams happy, at peace. And confident that I'd done really well because I was well organized. My mind was very clear. And so I ended up getting awards. I got a huge scholarship in university just because I always got A plus everything, A or A plus. Not a huge scholarship, but and it was quite a generous one. It doesn't really matter how you classify it, but yes, the torpor of the mind is a hindrance. But most important is just that you note it as well. Tired, drowsy.
Bante, here is the next question. If I go to meditation retreats where there are chores to do a bit more than simple, could that distract my practice?
Well, I mean, it could be excessive, but it's not really a problem because you can do it mindfully. If it's mental chores, right? If you're asked to do taxes for the meditation center or something, then that's a problem. Or public relations, or writing letters, or reading letters, or whatever. Once it becomes mental work, then you've got an issue, because that's mental time that you could otherwise be using being mindful. But if it's chores, physical chores, with very little mental labor required, really not that much of a hindrance. I guess it would be more if it cuts into your meditation time where you're asked to do many hours a day of chores, then, well, you'd be better served instead doing many hours of meditation, of course. And it's harder to be mindful during chores, for sure. No question. The Buddha even mentions that. He says, in regards to that, he mentions how it might come to mind that, oh, I did this hard work and I wasn't really able to be mindful, so I'm going to, or I did this very hard work and it tired me out, so I should rest now. And the Buddha said, that's not how you should think. You should think, I did this hard labor, and during that time it was very difficult for me to be mindful, so now I should apply myself twice as hard to meditation in order to make up for that time. But he does point out that it is harder to be mindful during, or it's for most people anyway, for a trainee, it's harder to be mindful during physical labor.
Bhante, we've reached the end of our second hour, so that will conclude our session for today. Thank you deeply for always offering your time every week and for sharing your invaluable wisdom. Thank you, Bhante.
You're most welcome. Thank you to everyone who made this broadcast possible, for those of you doing the organizing and presenting, those of you behind the scenes who are gathering the questions, and of course all the volunteers and the board of directors at Sri Mangalo who make this all possible by doing the work of keeping the organization running. Much appreciation for everyone who asks questions, for all the people who read the text, people who have insightful comments, and most important, for everyone who used this opportunity to cultivate mindfulness and to actually practice the Buddha's teaching. Much appreciation for your mindfulness. Not because it benefits me directly, necessarily, or not because of how it might benefit me in some way, but appreciation for how it benefits you. You see, in Buddhism, we want benefit for others. We like that. We appreciate that. We admire that. We laud it. We praise it. And we do so for two reasons. One, because it's the right thing to do, obviously. But two, because it's actually good practice in and of itself. It reminds us of what's good to do. It aligns us with good things. It's a way of overcoming jealousy. You know, you can be jealous of someone. Oh, they're so much better at Buddhism than me. But that doesn't happen if you appreciate them. Oh, I appreciate, wow, I'm so happy to see and so appreciative. And I praise you who are so good at this, much better at this than I am. That's good for you, right? Better than being jealous or frustrated or self-conscious, low self-esteem, that, oh, I'm not as good as this person. It's actually conceit. It's like reverse conceit. So much appreciation, and through the power of this goodness, all of the goodness that I've talked about here, all of these types of goodness that I mentioned, along with all other types of goodness, all the goodness that you've done on this occasion and in this life, and all the goodness you bring to this life that's allowed you to meet with the Buddha Sasana as a human being of sound mind and body, and the interest in putting the Buddha's teaching into practice. May all of that goodness, along with the power of the Buddha, the power of the Dhamma, the power of the Sangha, protect you and keep you from suffering, keep you from pain, keep you from danger, keep you from animosity, keep you from sickness, and keep you from suffering. May you all live healthy, happy, long lives with the strength to face whatever challenges come your way. May your minds ever be directed towards the cultivation of good things, the cultivation of the Dhamma taught by the Lord Buddha. May you all progress on the path and find progress and success in the practice of the Buddha's teaching, that in this life you may find happiness, happiness in the next life, happiness in all lives to come, until finally in this life or some other life, you're able to attain the path, fruition, and nibbana, and find true peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Sadhu.
Sadhu,
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 sadhu, sadhu.
sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu.
So